The European Union just hit pause on its planned tariff countermeasures against the United States, giving both sides a critical 90-day window to cool tensions, restart trade talks, and avoid another escalation in the already fragile global trade landscape. This move, confirmed late Wednesday by the European Commission, is being seen not just as a technical delay, but as a strategic diplomatic signal aimed at Washington. If you've been trying to make sense of what's really going on here, you're in the right place. In this video, we'll break down the decision, the motivations behind it, and what this delay could mean for businesses, importers, and global markets. And if you find this kind of in-depth trade coverage helpful, hit that like button, subscribe to US Trade and Tariff Watch, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us keep this channel running with high-quality, no-nonsense analysis every single week. Let's dive in. The European Union officially announced a 90-day delay on its planned retaliatory tariffs targeting American goods. These countermeasures were originally scheduled to take effect in response to the United States' most recent tariff hikes, particularly on European steel and aluminum derivatives. The announcement came through a brief but pointed statement from the European Commission's Directorate General for Trade. It emphasized the EU's preference for resolving disputes through negotiation rather than confrontation. While the European Union stands ready to defend its economic interests, we are equally committed to exploring diplomatic paths that avoid unnecessary escalation, the statement read. In practice, this means that products like US-made motorcycles, whiskey denim, and various agricultural goods, which were previously on the list for additional EU duties, will remain tariff-free for at least 3 more months. This 90-day delay doesn't come out of nowhere. It's part of a much broader and long-simmering trade dispute between the United States and the European Union, primarily focused on metal tariffs, and a series of retaliatory threats going back several years. To understand the current delay, we need to go back to the Section 232 tariffs imposed by the United States, first introduced in 2018 under President Trump. These tariffs targeted imported steel and aluminum, citing national security concerns. While some countries were eventually exempted, European producers were hit hard, triggering a wave of frustration in Brussels. Since then, there have been on and off negotiations to ease tensions. A temporary agreement reached in 2021 allowed the EU to export certain volumes of steel and aluminum to the US tariff-free under a tariff rate quota system. But even that was only a partial fix, and recent US actions have reignited tensions. Earlier this year, the White House introduced additional tariffs on derivative aluminum and steel products, arguing that foreign circumvention had become a loophole undermining the original Section 232 measures. The EU saw this as a violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of the earlier agreement. As a result, European officials began preparing a new round of retaliatory tariffs aimed at key American exports, designed to pressure Washington into revisiting its approach. So this week's delay doesn't erase the tensions, it simply pauses the counterstrike, giving negotiators one last shot at de-escalation before duties start landing on both sides. At first glance, a 90-day delay might seem like a bureaucratic move, but in the world of international trade, timing is everything. And this delay is full of meaning. So why now? First, it's a strategic signal. The European Union is showing restraint while leaving the door open for negotiation. By pausing countermeasures, Brussels is essentially saying, we don't want a trade war, but we're not backing down either. It's a classic diplomatic play designed to pressure Washington into returning to the table without immediately escalating tensions. Second, the timing coincides with key political moments. While countries like France and Germany have taken a harder line, others, including export-heavy economies like the Netherlands or Ireland, are more cautious. A delay gives member states time to build consensus before launching any measures that could hit sensitive sectors like agriculture, aviation, or automotive parts. And finally, this move gives time for businesses to prepare. Many companies were bracing for impact, unsure of which products would be hit or how severely. This 90-day window offers a chance for industry groups to lobby, assess supply chains, and even adjust sourcing if needed. So this isn't just a pause, it's a politically calculated move that buys time. Time for diplomacy, for internal alignment, and for business reaction. On the surface, this 90-day delay might seem like a purely economic decision, but make no mistake, this is political chess at the highest level. From Brussels' perspective, this delay sends a clear message to Washington. We're not abandoning our right to respond, but we're giving diplomacy a final chance. This gives the EU the moral high ground. By showing restraint, EU leaders can appeal to international allies and the World Trade Organization, portraying themselves as reasonable actors who prioritize multilateral cooperation over confrontation. At the same time, they're turning up the pressure on the Trump administration. The clock is now ticking. Washington knows that if a compromise isn't reached within 90 days, the EU's countermeasures will go into effect, and that could impact everything from bourbon exports to Harley-Davidson motorcycles and even Boeing aircraft parts. There's also a transatlantic trust issue beneath the surface. European leaders were frustrated that the US went forward with additional metal tariffs without full consultation. By delaying their response, they're signaling, "We noticed what you did, but we're still open to resetting the relationship." It's a subtle but powerful message. And it lands at a time when both blocs are trying to present a united front against China's trade policies, especially in sectors like clean energy, semiconductors, and critical minerals. A trade clash between the US and EU right now would weaken Western leverage in broader global trade debates, something both sides likely want to avoid. As of this recording, the White House has not issued a formal statement in response to the EU's 90-day delay, but behind the scenes, the move hasn't gone unnoticed. Sources close to the U.S. Trade Representative's office suggest that officials are viewing the pause as an opportunity, not a concession. In other words, Washington sees this as a brief opening to restart talks and possibly de-escalate what was quickly turning into another high-profile transatlantic trade conflict. However, there's little indication that the administration plans to reverse or suspend the tariffs that triggered the EU's response in the first place. Instead, U.S. officials seem to be doubling down on the position that the aluminum and steel derivative tariffs are both legal and necessary to protect national security and domestic industry. At the same time, Customs and Border Protection has continued enforcing the new tariffs without change. CBP's harmonized tariff schedule updates remain in place, and importers are being advised to review current rulings, ensure proper tariff classification, and prepare for continued enforcement at the port level. Behind closed doors, though, there are signs that negotiations are happening quietly. Trade attorneys, industry groups, and diplomatic staff have been meeting to review the scope of the retaliatory lists and explore potential compromise options, especially for sectors that would face disproportionate harm. In short, Washington's public face is firm, but the EU's delay may have given policymakers just enough political cover to shift into negotiation mode, without appearing to cave under pressure. For many American exporters, the EU's 90-day delay comes as a temporary relief, but not a resolution. Industries that were staring down the barrel of new tariffs can now breathe, for the moment. Among the biggest beneficiaries of this delay are American whiskey producers, especially Kentucky-based bourbon distilleries, are among the beneficiaries. The European Union had planned to reimpose a 50% tariff on U.S. whiskey, which would have significantly cut into exports and hurt small producers. Motorcycle manufacturers, including Harley-Davidson, whose bikes were once again under threat of steep EU duties, also stand to benefit. Agricultural exporters, particularly those dealing in corn, soy, and processed food goods, many of which were included on draft retaliation lists, are also impacted. These sectors had already begun preparing for tariff impacts by diversifying markets, adjusting contracts, or front-loading shipments ahead of the potential duty spike. Now, they have 3 extra months to regroup, but uncertainty remains. Meanwhile, industries that import EU products into the US aren't seeing much benefit. The US tariffs on EU metal derivatives are still in place, meaning American businesses, especially in construction, manufacturing, and packaging, are continuing to pay elevated costs on imported materials. This is particularly painful for small to mid-sized manufacturers who don't have the supply chain flexibility or bargaining power to shift sourcing or absorb the price increases. Also in limbo are companies caught in compliance gray zones where the classification of certain derivative products is still being contested. Legal and customs teams are racing to clarify how the tariffs apply and whether there's any relief on the horizon. In other words, this delay is helpful, but it's not a solution. It merely kicks the can down the road, leaving thousands of businesses still waiting for clarity. So what happens now? Over the next 90 days, trade officials from both the United States and the European Union are expected to engage in intensive, behind-the-scenes negotiations. The goal? To find common ground that either limits or removes the retaliatory tariffs, and possibly revisits the US position on derivative metal products altogether. But this will not be easy. Any meaningful breakthrough would require a rebalancing of current tariff structures, clarifications on product scope and eligibility, and a renewed commitment to collaboration rather than unilateral action. Both sides may instead aim for a symbolic win, some form of agreement that postpones escalation without requiring major compromises. For businesses, this means it's time to stay alert. If you're an exporter with goods on the EU's countermeasure list, use this window to reassess your exposure. Talk to your logistics team, consult your legal advisors, and prepare contingency plans in case negotiations stall. If you're an importer dealing with US tariffs on EU metals, make sure you're up to date with CBP guidance and classification rulings, because enforcement is still underway, even if retaliation is not. In the end, this delay is a chance, but not a guarantee. It's a pause that could lead to resolution or just another countdown to confrontation. We'll be tracking every development right here, so make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. If you found this breakdown helpful, give it a like and leave a comment below. Do you think the US and EU will find common ground, or are we headed for another round of retaliatory tariffs? And as always, full source links are listed in the video description for your reference. Thanks for watching US Trade and Tariff Watch, your trusted source for global trade news that actually makes sense.